What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling puzzled.
Puzzled? Okay, I can't think of anything. I was going to make a really stupid face, but does this stupid face that our podcast listeners can't see what it looks like have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
As usual, probably not.
I got to stop asking that.
Yeah. But recently, I had decided, I wanted to keep my brain stimulated. I wanted to find something to keep my mind at work, and I downloaded the New York Times Games app so that I could play the Wordle and the mini crossword puzzle and things like that. And I was having fun, and I did the mini crossword puzzle, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then they have like 20 or so free mini crossword puzzles, and I did all those. And then there was a pack of like 15 free crossword puzzles, and I did all those, and I did every free puzzle available in the app over the course of like 2 days. And I was like, I need more, and so I ended up like paying the $6 a month so that I can do the crossword puzzle and everything. I've done mini crossword puzzles going back to like June. Like, oh my God. I am having so much fun doing these crossword puzzles. Like, I haven't done a crossword puzzle since I was like in elementary school doing something like find the spring words. And it's like flower and like, rain cloud. And like, now I'm like, I've done like 50 crossword puzzles over the course of a week, and I'm like, I'm addicted to them now, and it's so much fun. But then doing the Wordle every day is fun. Doing some of the other puzzles they have in there is fun. So yeah, that's why I'm feeling puzzled. I am just addicted to all of these freaking games and puzzles in the New York Times Games app.
Oh my God, I didn't know that you were a Wordler. I am a Wordler and the current holder of a 38-day streak. Oh, and you just reminded me that I have to do it before midnight. I did not have time to do it today at work. Yes. So thank you for reminding me. Oh my God, I've been meaning to try Connections, and like it seems like something I might get frustrated with, but knowing now that they have a like free crossword puzzle every day that I could do, I like trying to keep my brain somewhat stimulated and, being on my phone doing something other than just endlessly scrolling and sending you memes.
Yeah. The Connections is fun. The word strands I love, because the word strands is like a word search, but like it can go in any direction. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, Wordle. I got pissed this week with the Wordle and the Connections because the Wordle, I figured out that the last 4 letters were ULLY.
Okay.
So I did bully, sully, pulley, like gully, and it turned out to be fully. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And that ended like my week-long streak that I had since I'd only been doing it for a week. And I got pissed off about that. Same thing happened with the Connections. I had like a 4 or 5 day streak going on that, and that ended. And even once it told me the answers, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand what this is telling me. I was never going to figure this out. I don't know what these the connection is, even once it's explained to me. So, but the Connections is fun, but it can frustrate you because you only get 4 chances.
Right, yeah. I've got to try it. I have to try it one day. My wife does it every day after finishing the Wordle, and she's a champ. She does so well at these, but I feel like I'd get frustrated. But you know what, Chris? Something about all of this, Wordles and crossword puzzles, it's real nerd shit. You know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck? We're men, dude. We're bros. And I feel like we've got to up the masculinity factor in this fucking place. And we got to fucking bro the fuck out, baby.
Shit.
The Pit Vipers are back. We're feeling swole. I tried to get Randy Savage back on the episode, but he was otherwise occupied.
I thought 1993 Kerry King just walked in.
For those of you listening, I'm wearing Pit Vipers. They are hot pink. and very reflective. I was really concerned everyone would be able to see my screen and the reflection of these, and thankfully that's not the case. But today we are talking about a fairly maligned genre of music, a genre that some people might say the internet came up with, and that is bro metal. Bands like Five Finger Death Punch, Godsmack, Disturbed, Pantera, dare I even say. Chris, we're going to be getting into what makes something bro metal, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether we like it or not, which I think is more important, and just if it's as toxic as some people say that it is. Chris, are you excited to bro the fuck out and get fucking swole on bro metal?
I am so ready to bro the fuck out right now. This was an interesting episode to go into and listen to this music, because some of this stuff is music that at one point in my life I was a big fan of. Maybe I occasionally still listen to it. Other bands, not so much. Bands I had to go back and listen to and be like, oof, no wonder we make fun of this shit all the time. But it was fun to go in and listen to it. And like you're saying, it's an interesting genre to talk about, because I think, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I think some of the qualities about bro metal, quote unquote, that so many people would have a problem with are similar qualities that you can have a problem with like other metalheads, in that like there's almost this like elitist attitude where like, oh, I'm so fucking metal because I listen to Disturbed. And it's like, okay, yeah, I was a 12-year-old kid who loved Disturbed, but like there's heavier stuff out there. If that's what you like, that's fine. But it gets more aggressive than that. And so I think when you have people that try to almost act elite or gatekeep when they're listening to something that someone else is gatekeeping them from listening to, death metal and thrash metal, and I don't know, it's a weird thing, and I can see how the bro metal bros are probably more visible because that music is getting played on the radio,
Right.
People who are like, oh, Mayhem is the only metal that matters, and if you don't listen to Mayhem, you're a fucking poser. Well, most of the world has not heard of Mayhem.
Right.
A lot of the world has heard of Disturbed or Godsmack. So if you're acting like Disturbed is the heaviest music on the planet, and you're telling other people you're so metal for listening to Disturbed, other people will listen to Disturbed and either tell you that it's not metal, or they'll tell you you're being a fucking jerk. Yeah. Whereas like with Mayhem, if someone is doing the same exact shit with Mayhem, the only people telling you you're being a jerk are other people who listen to niche metal, and so it's not happening in public the way it does with other stuff. So I'm sure we'll get more and more into it, but that's my very quick assessment of what we were kind of seeing with bro metal and the types of people that listen to bro metal, and I am excited to talk about this, and I'm excited to come up with as many insults about these bands as possible, but also have a lot of fun and talk about some of these bands that I used to love. I don't listen to it now, but I used to love some of this stuff, so I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
What made me think of this was our exploration of our older episodes for the scrap metal recycling bin, which if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Chris has put together these videos for us exclusively on YouTube, where we're revisiting all of our old episodes from back before we had the video element added onto the show. So definitely check out the scrap metal recycling bin on YouTube. But going back and listening to how much we ragged on Five Finger Death Punch was hysterical. Because it's like the first 5 episodes.
Yes.
They're just a punching bag. And I was like, okay, you know what? I was just taken aback by how often we picked on them and how much we brought them up. And then I was speaking to a coworker, and I was like, oh yeah, you like 80s music, like you like 80s synth pop, right? And he's like, no, actually, I'm a metal guy. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. I didn't take you for a metal guy. You seem so like chill and, regular kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I listen to Octane. I love Five Finger Death Punch. Bad Wolves. Oh, who else did he mention? He's like Linkin Park. He's like, yeah, I like really heavy metal. And I was like, okay, cool. Do you like Testament and like Slayer and Anthrax and stuff like that? And he's like, no, I don't really listen to that. And I was like, huh, this is not someone that I would consider a Pit Vipers muscle shirt bro, but he listens to a lot of what we would consider bro metal.
Yeah.
And bro metal being like, I feel like the memes that you see are like Affliction T-shirts that are cut into muscle shirts. Pit Vipers are just like ridiculous sunglasses or whatever. And like the boot cut, like faded denim jeans with rhinestones on them. Also probably from Affliction. I remember these were real big in like the 2010s. Like the edgier guys, like the bad boys would wear these. And there's just like, there are so many memes about guys that dress that way, that listen to bands like Five Finger Death Punch, that, you know, that wish they were in the military. That's another big dig that the memes take. But I was curious to see how much of that was true. How much of my distaste for Five Finger Death Punch, the little that I'd heard of them, was warranted, right? Because like you said, a lot of this stuff is just very commercial sounding and easily accessible hard rock or heavy metal. So I was questioning myself, like, am I still a gatekeeper? Am I still trying to tell people like, hey, this music fucking sucks, without giving it a chance? Because as you know, that was sort of the mission statement when we started out. We're going to try and broaden our horizons and open our minds, get rid of the gatekeeper attitude, right?
Yep.
But I think in going into this, I was finally able to say, okay, now I know I dislike XYZ band for these reasons.
Yeah.
Or I don't see what the big deal is, or I wouldn't necessarily consider this or that band metal, because it sounds like very commercial, clean cut sort of music.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if we're jumping straight into it, some of the elements, like we mentioned, right, sort of wishing that you were in the military, or lyrics about very, very militaristic lyrics. And this is why I kind of brought up like the toxic masculinity thing, where everyone is like, you're a soldier. All the lyrics are, you're a soldier and you're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, or, you know, you're out there on the battlefield, or, oh, I'm such a psycho and I'm just a loose cannon and don't mess with me because I'll pull the trigger, bah, 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 bah. That sort of stuff. And I'm like, I was puzzled, and at the same time so excited to start diving into it. So let's just start it right off with our favorite punching bag, none other than Five Finger Death Punch. These guys were, in my opinion, the poster boys for bro metal. Had you done any listening to Five Finger Death Punch before this, or before making fun of them 100 episodes ago?
You know, I think I may have heard of them, and I may have heard a song. I think they came out at a time that, as you know, I was at my Slayer fanatic worst. Right. I wasn't going to give anything like Five Finger Death Punch the time of day. And like I kind of said at the beginning of the episode, 5 years earlier, if Five Finger Death Punch comes out, they might be a band that at some point I listened to. But because of the time frame of when they came out and what I was listening to at the time, I could tell right away, based on who was listening to them and who was recommending them, that it wasn't going to be for me, that it wasn't going to be something that I would listen to. And so I know once you started picking on them, I was like, yeah, fuck those guys, you know? But this was really the first time where I sat down and was like, all right, let me listen to this band. And wow.
Was it everything you thought it would be? I was simultaneously not surprised and so surprised by how often some iteration of "I'm a psycho" or like I'm ready to snap" was brought up in the lyricism.
So like I really didn't focus too much on like what the lyrics were or what they were saying. But what I did notice, I decided to go back, listen to their first album, The Way of the Fist. Well, not the whole album. I listened to the first minute of like a handful of tracks. But I believe the opening track is Ashes. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, okay, 13-year-old me would have loved this.
Right.
But this is not for me. It's, you know, it's not necessarily bad, but it's not for me. And then the vocals came in, and I was like, this dude fucking sucks. These are some of the worst lyrics, like the worst vocals I've ever heard. And so like immediately I'm like, this is definitely not for me, and the vocals are terrible, and I want nothing to do with this. But I soldiered on, much like I assume these lyrics were inspiring other bros to do. You know, I listened to the title track, The Way of the Fist, and it's the same thing. It's heavy in a way that people that don't listen to metal would be like, yeah, this is fucking heavy. This is going to pump me up.
Right.
For someone who normally listens to what would probably be considered like radio-friendly rock or radio-friendly pop rock music, this is the type of stuff they would listen to in the gym and be like, yeah, this is the stuff that's going to get my adrenaline pumping and is going to make me want to, you know, push myself harder, whatever. The way, you know, you talk about the way you talk about your gym playlist is the same way other people would talk about these songs. I remember talking to a kid that I used to work with. You know, he mostly listened to rap and hip hop, but he would talk all the time when he was on the football team. They were listening to System of a Down before a game because that was the heavy rock music that got them going because they normally didn't listen to a lot of stuff. My brother who listens to death metal is, he's going to hype himself up listening to Desecrator by Exhorder. You know, some high school football kids, they're not going to listen to that. They're going to listen to whatever is the most radio-friendly and accessible. So I can see that Five Finger Death Punch very much fills that role and fills that niche for the people that want to listen to heavy music that's not necessarily scary, you know? And so that's what's interesting. And what was funny listening to this, I only listened to a few songs off of this one album. I didn't listen to anything else because the dude's voice like turned me off immediately, you know?
Ivan Moody is a product of I Wish I Was in Slipknot. And that's evident by his original band Motorgrader, where it's you listen to that one song, I think it's called Suffocate by Motorgrader, and it's like, oh yeah, this is just Five Finger Death Punch before it was Five Finger Death Punch. And it's the dirty grungy vocals with the clean choruses.
Yes.
And it's very formulaic and very indicative of late 2000s, right? The late aughts, early 2010s.
Yeah, I forget if it was the title track or the song Salvation, but I very much clocked the same thing, that Salvation was a shitty Slipknot song. And so listening to it, what the conclusion I came to with Five Finger Death Punch is that Five Finger Death Punch sounds like if Hatebreed and Slipknot had a baby, and then the baby partially absorbed its twin, and then that baby grows up and has this like partially absorbed conjoined twin that spends its life begging for death. That's
fucking Malignant.
That's Five Finger Death Punch. Five Finger Death Punch is the parasitic twin of the baby that Hatebreed and Slipknot had.
Oh, so it's not even like the full baby. It's the parasite.
It's the parasite. It's the parasite hanging off of the baby's stomach. You know, and that's what it sounded like, because it was very clearly, you know, this album came out in 2007. So you have the influences of bands that have already made a name for themselves, like Hatebreed and Slipknot, and they're taking what those bands did before them and combining them. And like I said, if I had been a teenager when I found this stuff, I would have been all about it. But by the time this stuff came out, it's not what I was looking for anymore.
Yeah.
But I could very much hear that it was like, oh, he wants to be like Hatebreed if their songs were like 2 minutes longer, or Slipknot if they sucked, you know? So
I was so surprised. Slipknot, if they sucked. Oh man, you mean Mushroomhead?
Slipknot,
I was so surprised.
Slipknot with less members. Let's go with that.
Yeah, there you go. Oh man, Slipknot if only the original members actually played in the band. Dude, I was so surprised that these songs were so fucking long because they were stretching such a thin concept with each one of these songs. And like, to give credit where credit's due, the musicianship is all very good.
Yeah.
Like, the drummer was very good on all the tracks, very tight. The guitarist, I think his name is Zoltan.
Zoltan!
Oh man, as soon as I heard Zoltan open up the
Quick
sky.
to my mom's minivan!
Oh god, yeah, so that kids is a reference to the movie Dude, Where's My Car? Oh man. If she doesn't know Dude, Where's My Car, she's too young for you, bro. Oh god. But yeah, there's very, very glossy production. It's very mainstream appealing and has a very it's clearly trying to reach a broader mainstream audience, which is not a bad thing. I don't want anyone to come away from this episode thinking, oh, these guys just don't like mainstream metal. Because think about it. Metallica at this point is mainstream metal. Alice in Chains at this point is mainstream, heavy music. But I think that the problem that Chris and I have, like you mentioned at the top of the episode, is when people are like, oh, this is the heaviest stuff that's out there. Like, you're never going to hear anything heavier. And then when you try, some of these people, because I have had the experience where I'm like, oh, if you like them, you should check these guys out. And they're like, nah, I tried. I don't like it. It's not for me. And like, I'd get a little offended, right? Try Pantera if you like Five Finger Death Punch. It's not for me. So what do you mean? The musicianship's even fucking better.
Yeah.
The songs are way fucking better. And then it gets like personal. But then I'm like, okay, maybe that's just not what they're looking for. They want something to have a little bit of a popular edge to it.
Yeah.
And boy, when I was going through all their fucking songs, that they have so many fucking covers. The cover of Bad Company was so bad that it kept me up that night. I just kept thinking I'm like, how do you fuck up Bad Company by the band Bad Company off the album Bad Company? They pulled a God's Hate before God's Hate. Also, weird fact, Timothy McVeigh loved to play the song Bad Company when he was in the military. He would play it in the tank, and everyone in his regiment hated him. They were like, McVeigh, stop playing this fucking song. So if you need to know the type of people that listen to this, I'm not going to finish that sentence because I don't want it to be on record that I'm implying that you're the Unabomber if you listen to Five Finger Death Punch. But yeah, it's just all... The music is very, very mainstream, and the common thread that so many of these bands had was the appealing to like the military bro, the like I have signed up for the military, or I'm on the front lines, or that sort of feel with the artwork, with the song titles, with the lyricism. Everything is very much like we want to get these military guys pumped up, which fine, fair. There's really no problem with that, but it is such a common thing with all of these bands that it's so interesting to me, where it's like, is that part of their thing? Where it's like, hey, our producer's telling us that we've got to write a song that's going to make guys want to sign up for the military. So we've got to come up with something. And yeah, it was an experience to say the least. I gave them way more time than I ever had before. And my assessment of them now is it's just not for me. It's not for me. Like you said, had I been 12 or 13, sure, no problem. Instead, I found fucking Limp Bizkit, and I was insufferable in a different way. But the next band that we want to talk about is the band Bad Wolves. And Bad Wolves is really, really an interesting case to me, because this is just Daughtry. For anyone that knows Chris Daughtry, they just sound like Chris Daughtry or Shinedown, like a somewhat heavier Shinedown, or Nickelback. And I was like, wait a minute. I have to have the band wrong. Is this Tommy Vext's old band? Like the band that he was kicked out of? It can't be, because I thought that was a way heavier band. I thought that this is the band that the guy from God Forbid is in. I thought that was a way heavier band. And I listened to a couple songs and I'm like, this just sounds like bro country. It sounds like fucking oh God, I've gone blank on all of the. Thankfully I've moved on from my country phase. But it sounds like all of that, like Florida Georgia Line type of like bro country, like the hick hop type country music that has gotten really popular now, that we're starting to see a lot of people move away from, and they're going to like old school actual outlaw country. So it was, I was just not expecting the music to sound like this. The music sounded very, very emotional. It sounded very I don't want to say soft as an insult. I don't mean soft as an insult, but it sounded very like Nickelback. It sounded very like Chris Daughtry. It sounded very commercial.
It's non-threatening is what it is.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Because as you were, talking a little bit more about Five Finger Death Punch and talking more about what Bad Wolves sounds like, and I did not listen to much. I have listened to Daughtry. I understand the sound you're talking about. Shinedown is a band. I like a couple songs. I understand the sound you're going for, but it made me think of an assessment I think I made of metalcore that I think is even more apt when talking about some of these bands, is that it's all bark and no bite, in that it is using all of the qualities you expect to hear in a metal song, and they are doing it in the most non-threatening way possible. They are, maybe they're down-tuning their guitars, maybe they're not. Maybe they're writing in a minor key, maybe they're not. But the focus is more on just having a non-threatening commercial appeal while sounding like the heavier bands that will scare people. And so I think some of this music, it's coming across as non-threatening, no matter how much they try to say that they're like a violent psychopath or whatever it is. It comes across as being non-threatening because they want to be commercially successful, which, like we're saying, there's nothing wrong with that. These bands have been very successful. They figured out a formula that works for them, that works for their fans, and that's great. That's, it's not for us, but it's great for them that they have this style of music that encapsulates everything that they want out of their music. And so but yeah, as you were talking and as you were trying to find the words to describe bands like Bad Wolves, or Daughtry or even Nickelback, Nickelback to a less extent, because I feel like Nickelback isn't trying to be heavy at all. But
I think that they have heavier elements, but yeah, they're not putting themselves out there as like, we are like a tough
metal
band.
Yeah. But they are using elements of very heavy, very aggressive music.
Yeah.
And they're making it more commercially appealing, which, it takes talent to do something like that. Like we're saying, and it's funny, I didn't want to go on this tangent, but with Five Finger Death Punch and talking about that, the music was good. It was performed very well. It was the vocals that bothered me. I recently tried listening to Megadeth again for a reason that I'll talk about some other time, why I was listening to it. But I was listening to, like, Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, because there's parts of that song that I absolutely love. And the music is great. I put on Tornado of Souls, and I'm like, this music, like, this is one of the coolest fucking thrash metal songs I've ever heard. And then Dave's voice comes on, and I physically recoiled and had to stop the song because his voice is atrocious. And so it's funny how that can happen, and how, for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. If your idea of what is heavy metal is a dude with the voice, that you hear in Five Finger Death Punch. All right. I think it sucks, but I think
it's a similar thing with Tommy Vexed, where I remember hearing, because God, when I tell you these fucking bands love covers with low vocals, oh my God, with like low, what the fuck word am I thinking of? Like vocal range. They're
baritone.
Baritone vocals. It's the fucking bad guy. Company always on. The fucking cover of Zombie. It's zombie. It's like all of them are trying to be crooners, and it's I love a good low voice. I love Peter Steele. I like there's a YouTuber, Jonathan Young, that does a lot of like Disney song covers, and he does a really cool cover of the Phantom of the Opera, and he's got a super low voice. And so I love that, but it's just, it's weird. It's almost like they want to be Howard Jones, but Howard just has this fucking silk in his voice, boy. He has got such fucking power behind his voice that these guys do not have. And so the weird thing with Tommy Vexed is, I mentioned how like a lot of these bands are very like, we love the military, and we want to give off this vibe like we're right there on the front lines with you, brother. And their first album is called Disobey, and it's got a dude in like holding an assault rifle in SWAT gear, right, on the cover. And their first song is like against police brutality. And then I listened to another song, and there are hints within the lyricism talking about like racism and the struggle of someone having to face that ugliness. And then comes the turn, I guess the heel turn in Tommy Vexed's history, in his fucking Wikipedia page. I did not realize that he was the singer of the band Divine Heresy. When they came out, I was like, oh, this is pretty good stuff. Dino Cazares from Fear Factory and this dude with a low voice singing. Okay, this is pretty cool. And then I remember hearing that they kicked the singer out because he got into a physical altercation with Dino. And I'm like, oh, that fucking sucks. That guy's a dick. And then Bad Wolves comes out. And I remember hearing about them after their split with Tommy, because, and he said, I expressed my support for Donald Trump. I expressed my support for my beliefs, and that's why the band kicked me out. Cancel culture kicked me out and ruined my fucking band. It came for me finally. Cancel culture is going to come for you. And I'm like, is this the same fucking guy? So now hearing these lyrics, it's just, there was a lot of fucking like a cognitive dissonance, where I'm like, you're singing about the thing that you're now kind of wholesale supporting, and that you've turned your whole entire personality to. So if you want to talk about trying to make yourself as commercially appealing to the largest amount of people, Tommy Vexed, I suppose, has found out the secret fucking sauce. So it's just beyond the fact that they just sounded like Daughtry, who I love. We talked about it just before hitting fucking record.
Yeah.
Like Shinedown. Love Shinedown.
Yeah.
Chris Daughtry. Dude, my fucking high school girlfriend and I would listen to that shit all day long. That's all she listened to. So like, I remember hearing all of that stuff and being like, this is actually pretty good. And there is something to be said about writing catchy rock music, writing catchy hard rock music. That's fine. I think it just comes down to when you're portraying yourself to be this super, super heavy band, and then you kind of sound that way. It's an odd mix. It's a really odd mix. And then when you take yourself that seriously, that I think is just a recipe for disaster. It's just so fucking odd. I don't understand the lack of self-awareness to say like, you've been kicked out of 3 bands now, or 2 bands now.
Yeah.
Maybe you are the problem. So I don't know. A lot of these bands so far have not been for me. I can understand the appeal, and I can understand, Chris, like you said, the talent that it takes to write something that's commercial and that has this much widespread appeal.
Yeah.
But a band that I find myself trying to defend more and more these days, Russell, I'm looking at you, buddy, is the band Godsmack. I fucking love Godsmack. But Russell pointed something really funny out to me. They've got like 6 or 7 albums. I like 2.5 of them at best. That first album is great, but the album Awake, their second album, is phenomenal. I will fight anybody. I will bro out on anyone that says that that's not a great album, because that's just like quintessential early 2000s groove metal. It wasn't quite nu metal and it wasn't quite hard rock. It was, I think, somewhere in between, just metal. Like just plain old metal, in the way that the 2000s still had a way of producing, right? And they're fucking like Tommy Rumbola, I think is the guitarist name. Great fucking guitarist. Like playing these classic rock guitar solos over this heavy metal. Sully Erna's voice is fucking great. Actually, Elizabeth from the Charismatic Voice has done, I think, 2 videos on Godsmack, right? On Voodoo and, is it I Stand Alone?
Maybe.
From the fucking Scorpion King?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Her reaction to Sully's voice is great. Because she was like, wow, he's got a lot of grit to his voice. For those who don't know, Godsmack actually started out and got their name from Alice in Chains. So they started out as an Alice in Chains cover band. So they kind of like took those elements and just tried to go a little bit heavier, a little less grungy, and more the metal route. But I think that Godsmack is maybe considered bro metal by the younger generation. Like clearly Gen Z they've like fallen out of favor with them. They've fallen out of favor with me because I haven't listened to anything after Faceless. And the stuff that I've heard now, like Crying Like a Bitch or like 1000 Horsepower, those songs are no good. They're just I don't like them. But a song like Greed, a song like Spiral, a song like is it called Sinking or Drifting? Shit. Those songs off of Awake are fucking great. But I also think that they're bro metal by association, again, because of their link to the military.
Yes.
Anyone who grew up in the early 2000s remembers the Navy commercials.
Yes.
With the song Awake off of the album Awake by Godsmack. You know, that fucking riff was killer.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know what? I watched something like that and I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going to do. It's just, Chris, I know that you have family members in the service. What do you think it is about this music that speaks to them? Is it just simply trying to up your adrenaline level? Or do you think that there's something intentional about, like, we've got to get people really psyched about the fucking military, and this is how we're going to do it?
I think it's a mix of both. I think it's trying to, I think you have to think about the time frame that these things happened in. So Awake came out, what?
Right.
2002.
2000.
So you have the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in 2001.
Yeah.
And then you have these military commercials that are showing these kick-ass clips of, jets taking off of aircraft carriers and destroyers in formation. And, you've got people on the decks, in their helmets and their microphones,
swabbing them,
like just doing all this stuff. And so you have all of that with this really cool riff. Sully's voice coming in with just like a grunt or something, like at the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you have that, and you have, and plus it's mixed in with the time where we as a country are filled with unbridled patriotism after being attacked. So I think those are the reasons why that happened at that time, because they were like, hey, Godsmack is this band. And I seem to remember hearing the story that it was something like something that like Sully agreed to and the rest of the band hated it, or like
Really?
something. I remember reading the story recently about how the song Awake was used in a Navy commercial, and there was some split in opinion between like whether it was Sully and the rest of the band or whether it was the entire band and the record label. I don't remember who was mad at who, but I seem to remember reading a story recently that the use of the song Awake in a U.S. Navy commercial was unpopular with either all or some of the members of the band. Like I said, I don't remember. I didn't do enough research. But I seem to remember...
Listeners, YouTube audience, comment for us.
Yeah,
Let us know
but
if you know.
I seem to remember hearing something along those lines about this song being included in a commercial for the U.S. military. And yeah, I think, part of it is the military is going to do whatever they think is going to encourage young men to enlist.
Yeah.
And, not to go in that tangent about how, the recruiters always show up in the poor school districts and never show up in the rich school districts. That's a completely different conversation that, we're not going to have right now. But I think just the fact that it's there, and I think as we're talking, and I know more bands we're going to talk about, I think follow the same sort of thing. I Stand Alone, like you said, that was a Godsmack song that I really enjoyed. From the Scorpion King, which is The Rock, who's a professional
the
wrestler.
Famous Dwayne Johnson vehicle.
Yeah, which I think, like, this song was probably advertised on WWE television. Listening to, some of these other bands that I'm sure we'll talk about, it's music that appealed to the young men that were watching WWE at the time. And it is funny how, like, recently, within the past, like, year or so, Bad Bunny like wrestled and performed at a WWE show and like performed at a WWE show. They had a show in Puerto Rico and he wrestled there and he was singing there, and it was funny how all of the bros, I guess, who still listen to, Godsmack and watch WWE are like, who the fuck is Bad Bunny? Like, this, who is this guy? Where's like the rock and the metal that we listen to? And then you have other fans that are like, he is like one of the most streamed artists in history. Just because you've never heard of him, like, that kind of shows you have no idea what the fuck is going on. And I'll admit, I had no idea who he was, but I have no problem admitting that I have no idea what's going on in popular music. I find the stuff I like. But it's funny how some of the music we're talking about is the same exact music that was used to advertise WWE pay-per-views in the early 2000s. And so that was trying to appeal to young men. The military is going to try to appeal to young men, so I think there's going to be that, whether that's intentional or not on some of these bands' parts, they're trying to basically attract the same audience that WWE and the military are trying to attract, which is young men.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Young, angst-riddled men is the thing. And like, it's funny because like with a band like Godsmack and a band like Disturbed, right? I just want to mention Straight Outta Line. Straight Outta Line's a fucking phenomenal. Why am I doing the Trump hands? Straight Outta Line's a great fucking song by Godsmack. I fucking love that song so much, and fucking just so fucking good. Shannon Larkin's drumming on that fucking song, and again the guitar solo so fucking good. But anyway, with a band like Godsmack and a band like Disturbed, it's I don't know if you see in my notes. I'm like, just look at my notes for Godsmack. It's pretty much the same thing. They're both of them are iconic bands, but Godsmack, I don't know, that I guess specifically that album just really resonated with me. Where Disturbed, I was like, yeah, they've got a couple good songs, but I'm not going to listen to anything really beyond the first album. Their second album was okay, but it just fell out of favor with me. And I think it was about just reaching that sort of audience, like you said, reaching the audience of guys that are angsty, the guys that are like, fuck, like nobody understands me, like, feeling like it's throw Limp Bizkit in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that sort of like almost frat bro type of angst of like, you don't really have all that much going on against you right now. And like some of them might, some of their listeners might. I can't speak in blanket statements.
Yeah.
But where it's like, if you made a really good point at the beginning of the episode, if we were younger when we'd heard these bands, they might have appealed to us way, way more. Where like a band like Disturbed, I did hear them when I was younger, and they just didn't stick with me. I think at that point I was already starting to see like there's better stuff out there.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of the music that I do like, that I do enjoy, and the newer stuff that's coming out that I am listening to, a lot of it is very rage-filled. A lot of it is very angry. Take the song Belligerent by Kubla Khan. Great fucking lyrics. Talking about just basically being angry and like, you know what? I've fucked you over. Fucking take a swing at me. Like, they are talking about how angry they are, but none of it is used in the way that it's used like in Five Finger Death Punch, for example, where it's like, I'm a psycho, so don't come at me. You don't want to mess with me sort of stuff. It's more like, hey, I've fucked up in life and I'm able to admit it, and I'm angry because of the situations that I've put myself in, where these other singers are talking about it as like I forget what song it was, but it was something along like the I'm a lone wolf and I'll pull the trigger type of stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that is like very, like, again, you can lump it in there with toxic masculinity if you want to. You can also just throw it out there as just like, hey, these are just lyrics. I don't think that they really mean anything.
Yeah.
But to the right person, it might kind of twist the way that they look at the world and just their outlook on life in general. And if they've got that thing that they can go ahead and hinge those thoughts on, I think that it can be kind of toxic. I'm not, I don't know. The conversation of toxic masculinity and cancel culture, I'm not going to fucking get into that because it's just, it's fucking dumb. But again, talking about the way that bands will like come and go and fall out of favor with the younger generation, I feel like Pantera is starting to see some of that. And Pantera, I think this is a hot take, is considered bro metal. Because I think just because they are lumped into like this older dad rock, it's basically classic rock at this point. But I think that they are considered bro metal because of our generation really being into them. Yeah. And like it's the constant gym music, and it's like it's the stuff that the like you'll see the memes like divorced dads pulling up to pick up their kid blasting Cemetery Gates. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or like the Domination breakdown. And I don't know, like I love Pantera, but do they have some of those bro metal elements? I don't think that they're ticking the same boxes, right? They don't have the same sort of lyricism that we're seeing in a lot of these other bands. They don't have the outright appeal or marketing to the military bros or trying to find that sort of audience. And I think that the musicianship and just the songwriting is way, way fucking better.
I think in the ways that we have talked about certain bands that will be kind of like the prototype, I think that's Pantera.
Okay.
Pantera is the proto-bro metal.
Proto-broto metal.
Yeah. Because here's a very specific, very stupid in a way, but very specific way that I'm looking at it. So when you think of the bros, and I saw, someone post online is, the bro metal starter pack that has Five Finger Death Punch and Godsmack and a can of Monster Energy and stuff like that. But the thing that is often included in a starter pack that I feel like is going in that direction is a black muscle shirt, camouflage cargo shorts,
Yeah.
and combat boots.
Yeah.
And Dimebag Darrell would wear black muscle shirts, camouflage cargo shorts, and combat boots. So
Yeah.
I think there is that proto element of Pantera in that they were writing what was thrash metal to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
They were creating or stealing, depending on who you ask, this style of music that would become known as groove metal. And they were very successful in playing that style of metal that was, I mean, I don't know what was going on. You know, their entire career happened before I even started listening to them. So I can't say how commercially acceptable they were. I can't say how much they were getting, you know, radio airplay or their music videos were being shown. But when I listen to Pantera, like you're saying, I really like Pantera. I have listened to that album, Cowboys from Hell, I don't even know how many freaking times. You know, there's so many good songs. I love, like the fucking song Shattered. I fucking love that song.
Yeah.
But even though I love that music, when I compare it to some of the other stuff I listen to, there is faster or more aggressive stuff that is a little bit more appealing to me. And so in the grand scheme of the, you know, from the most commercially acceptable to the least commercially acceptable scale of music that I listen to, Pantera is certainly closer to being commercially acceptable than some of the other music that I listen to.
Right.
So I can see how someone can kind of be like, okay, definitely more aggressive than these other bro metal bands, but still not as aggressive as some of these other older thrash metal bands. And I think there is that idea that it's like, okay, people, you know, the people who listened that were associating with bro metal dress like Dimebag. So there's kind of that association. Plus, Phil Anselmo keeps giving us reasons to not like him. So let's just, you know, keep, you know, not, you know, us, you know, giving Pantera more shit. So there's definitely that aspect.
Boy, he sure loves white wine. Sure, Phil. Sure.
But yeah, I think in that ways I can see how like Pantera would not necessarily be lumped in, but like the previous generation's bro metal. You know? It's,
right.
You know, it was bro metal before there was bro metal, because like even like, so it's I want to go back to Disturbed for a second, because Disturbed is a band that I did really enjoy. That second album, Believe. I listened to the shit out of that album. You know, songs like Prayer, Liberate, the title track, the song Remember. Off of The Sickness, I loved the song Stupefy. I didn't have the album, I just downloaded the song, but I loved Stupefy. You know, and I really liked that music, but at some point, I don't know if Disturbed changed or if I changed, but by the time you get to, I forget if it's like 10,000 Fists or some shit, and then like there's by the time they get to their Sound of Silence cover, I'm like, these guys are still a thing.
Oh, that's right.
Like I was like, these guys still exist, and like I seem to remember there were people I knew in college that like they didn't wear Disturbed T-shirts, but they had like a Disturbed sticker on like one of their notebooks, and I'm like, wait, if that person who's dressed kind of preppy right now, which granted there was a dude in a, you know, baby blue sweatshirt who introduced me to symphonic death metal, so appearances can be deceiving, but like as far as I knew this person, they really didn't listen to heavy music, and they had a Disturbed sticker on their notebook and apparently really liked that one album. Like I said, that kind of introduced that like Disturbed guy mascot they have now.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so like I'm like, okay, I think if it's appealing to people that clearly have a different taste in music than me, then it's not for me. And then, like you said, you know, the insistence to cover songs. I do not get the hype around their Sound of Silence cover. I think it's awful.
Me neither.
It is so bad. I do not like it at all. And I know you don't like Paul Simon, so can muddy your judgment as well. I actually really enjoy Paul Simon, and I love the original. But this is you're trying to sound tough, doing this really covering this really soft song, and I don't know, it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me at all.
I think if we had Howard Jones cover any of these songs that have been covered by Bad Wolves or Five Finger Death Punch or Disturbed, I think it would have sounded way better. But I don't know.
But I think because when I first went to the Five Finger Death Punch page on Spotify, Bad Company is the most played song. And so that starts playing, and I'm like, wait, this is a fucking cover. I don't want to hear them cover a song. If I'm going to make fun of them, I want to make fun of their original stuff. And so I only listened to 8 notes before I realized it was a cover, so I didn't get as far as the voice. But I think there is kind of this idea where it's kind of like, oh, we're going to make this song sound heavier by covering it, and it's you don't have to do that. If you just played it similar to the original, if you want to add your own twist, that's fine, but where Sound of Silence sounds like a completely different song, and that song is not good. Whatever Disturbed did with that song.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to that, because Disturbed was a band that I did really enjoy at one point, and I would listen to that album, Believe, all the time. But eventually, like I've said a couple times, I found something else that really appealed to me, and by the time Disturbed came out with a new album or was kind of getting radio play or whatever, I was like, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. I've moved on to something else, and that's always an interesting thing for me when it's some of these bands that I'll make fun of, there are those things where it's I'll make fun of everything they did except for this one album that I heard when I was 12 years old. That I still enjoy. The other 6 albums they've put out, I have no interest in. But that one album that I listened to when I was also an angsty teen, that still rocks my shit. So
yeah. I think a lot of it, too, is just how seriously they take themselves. I think that's maybe part of the memeability of bands like this. It's the same reason why black metal gets memed up and down. There are artists that take themselves so painfully seriously.
Yeah.
When they're making I think that you should take yourself seriously as an artist.
Yes.
But I think that if you are trying to portray yourself as this whacked out guy and you're such a psycho, it's like the fucking Joker guys. Remember that fucking Halloween where everybody was dressed as Heath Ledger? Imagine if all those guys started fucking bands.
No, they were all dressed as the Joker. I dressed as Heath Ledger and offended people dressed as Heath Ledger, which was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun that Halloween. How mad people got at me. It's all right. I'm gonna share this story. No. I'm going to share the story because it's funny. So 2008, The Dark Knight comes out. Everyone loves Heath Ledger's Joker. Me, we'll save that for another day. So come Halloween, everyone's dressing up as the Joker. And I knew everyone was going to dress up as the Joker because I'd seen the, insane popularity that Heath Ledger's Joker had. And so I walk into Hot Topic one day, and they have a Joker tuxedo T-shirt. Mm-hmm. It was a purple T-shirt that looked like the Joker's tuxedo. And I saw that shirt, and I was like, oh, I know what my Halloween costume is going to be. So I buy the T-shirt, and I take a empty prescription bottle and rip the label off, and I fill it with Smarties, and I walk around all day saying, why so serious? And down the bottle of Smarties and then fall to the floor. And I do remember someone being like, oh, too soon, bro. And then I do remember one of our friends walking in, seeing me in the Joker shirt, and he's like, "Oh, these fucking kids dressed as Joker. You're even dressed as the Joker." And I'm like, "No, I'm dressed as Heath Ledger." And I shook the prescription bottle, and he threw his head back and started laughing. And he's like, "That's fucked up. That's awesome." But yeah, so that was, yeah, there was Joker guys, the people that post like the Joker memes that are like, something about like, "Oh, don't mistake my silence for weakness," and it's a picture of the Joker holding a gun, or like Bugs Bunny smoking a cigar. It's like, these are, I assume these people listen to Five Finger Death Punch.
Yes. Five Nights at Death Punch is what I kept thinking of. Seeing the fucking abbreviation. Oh, gosh. I have sort of a hard question for you. Do you think that bro metal, being as commercially appealing as it is a fair representation for what heavy metal is to the general masses right now? Forget whether we like it or not. Do you think this is what people think heavy metal is?
I don't know. It's entirely possible that this is what people think heavy metal is, but I think it depends on which band.
Okay.
Because I think, even though we are lumping all these bands in together, Disturbed is very different from Five Finger Death Punch.
Sure.
And I think if people look at Disturbed as being, quote unquote modern metal, even though they're like 25 fucking years old at this point.
Yeah.
I can see people thinking that like their most recent music, their cover of Sound of Silence, is what metal it sounds like now.
Right.
And is what metal is. But at the same time, and granted they've been around for like nearly or over 50 years at this point, or who knows, but Metallica is putting out music that I think is terrible. But people are buying these albums, people are listening to this music, people are seeing them play these sports stadiums when they go on tour. Now, like I said, they're the most commercially successful metal band in the world. They have lots and lots and lots of music, 40 years worth of music, some of it good, some of it not so much, but they have cultivated a very massive fan base. So I know I made this joke a few episodes ago to the general public. Every metal band is Metallica. So I think in some ways you could say that some of these bro metal bands are what the general public thinks metal is. But at the same time, I think there's also this idea that it's just... Because the thing is, when people who make fun of metal that don't listen to metal, they usually do like a death metal impression. Or they talk about the things about the things that are usually associated with death metal or black metal. So I think to the public, they might just think this is just like hard rock, or they might just call it metal.
Yeah.
And think that, anything heavier than that is death metal. Mm-hmm. That's the way I could kind of see some people looking at it. Definitely an interesting question. Definitely an interesting conversation to have. What does the public think of these bands? And do they think that this is what all metalheads are like? It's definitely a possibility if you know someone who is one of these bros that wears Five Finger Death Punch T-shirts and that's all they talk about, and that's your only exposure to metal, you're going to be like, yeah, these metalheads are fucking pieces of shit, But it's all based on what your exposure is, I think. So it's definitely an interesting question, but I think it's also hard to gauge just based on, what someone is exposed to.
That's a great answer. And I need to take these off. Oh, God. Oh my god, it made it so dark. I was straining my eyes so badly.
I thought you were going to take them off right away, and then you kept them on, and I was like, all right, I guess this is a thing.
Yeah, no. I was committed to the fucking bit. Oh. Ow, oh god. Okay. This is the bet I've made. That's a bro metal intro right there. This is the bet I've made. World of Darkness. Company always on the run. So, Chris, in the style of many of these bro metal bands, I think that we should suggest my cover of Alanis Morissette's Ironic. You know, isn't it ironic? Don't you think? Or something like that. I don't know. I feel like that would be really fun. I'll make that song if you guys want me to. But Chris, in all seriousness, what is your suggestion for this weird-ass bro metal episode?
So my suggestion for our broing out is a band that came up in the, fans also listened to when I was listening to Five Finger Death Punch on Spotify. And that's the band Saliva. And they're, I want to say either 2000 or 2002, somewhere around there, their album Every 6 Seconds. This is an album that I really enjoyed when I was younger, because, again, it was songs being played on WWE TV, songs like Superstar, Click, Click, Boom, Your Disease. I know some of these songs were also featured in me, my brother, and our next door neighbor played the shit out of the PlayStation 2 video game, MX 2002, featuring Ricky Carmichael. And that had Saliva, Sum 41, some other bands that we would listen to all the time. So yeah, I listened to this album Every 6 Seconds all the time. I love these songs. I remember the joke about the name of the song is that men think about sex every 6 seconds. So when you visit the website, because, I'm a fan of the band in the early 2000s, I'm visiting the website on a school computer in the computer lab, and it comes up with these silhouettes of women as it's counting down and all this and that. And I remember the girl next to me being like, Chris, what the fuck kind of website are you going to? I'm like, no, it's a band. It's a band. Their song is called Every 6 Seconds. Their album is Every 6 Seconds. So, yeah, I don't think anyone else will get that same 7th grade computer lab experience that I did. But definitely listen to Saliva and their album Every 6 Seconds with songs like Superstar, Click, Click, Boom, and Your Disease.
I fucking love the song Your Disease. And I remember when that came out too. And it definitely invokes oh shit, I forget what his name is, the fucking guy. But it invokes images of people with bedazzled jeans. Bedazzled bootcut jeans. So yeah, Saliva fucking rocks. For what they were at the time, you're a 12-year-old kid. It's your disease, it's killing me. That's a great fucking song.
I was all about it.
So my suggestion this episode, I am bewitched by a by a very difficult choice here. I wanted to suggest the band Virtue and their song Frame of Mind, because this song got me listening to a bunch of other stuff from them, and they're really fucking heavy. I really like them. They have been added to the heavy metal workout playlist, which I talk about it all the time. That's the way that I get myself pumped up, and that's kind of why I wanted to suggest them, because I was like, all right, I'm using them for theoretically the same reason that guys that listen to bro metal are listening to bro metal.
Yep.
But then I thought to myself, all right, bro metal is a style of music that's maybe a little bit more commercial, has a little bit more of that commercial appeal, and that made me think of the band Throne and their song Nights. I saw a drum cam performance of this song on YouTube. It was just suggested to me randomly. So I watched the performance because it looked like it was a really cool thumbnail, so I watched the whole performance. This drummer goes fucking in on this. He's just fucking locked in on the beat. And it's a great fucking song. And the rest of their album, I listened to it and I was like, okay, this is a little bit more commercial. This is a little bit more, I think, has a little bit wider of an appeal. Still has a lot of hardcore elements, some sort of, beat 'em up breakdown riffs and stuff like that. But this song in particular, the song Nights, I think is something that an everyday bro that listens to Five Finger Death Punch or Godsmack or Disturbed or Saliva would be able to get into. So for, showing them some love, the band Virtue, definitely check those guys out. But the band Throne and their song Nights is my suggestion for this bro metal episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. Forget what the rest company. That's why I keep forgetting, because that's just fucking playing in my head.
I thought you might go into the Macho Man, the cream rises to the top,
No, I'm waiting to do that on the fucking recycling bin episode. Oh, man. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night.